The slap echoed across the training room. 20 Navy SEALs stood frozen as Lieutenant Westbrook's hand left a red mark on her cheek. He'd been berating her for 10 minutes straight, questioning her place among the elite warriors. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just stood at perfect attention as his tirade built to this physical crescendo. No one intervened. Then, with unsettling calm, Lieutenant Card finally spoke. "Permission to demonstrate proper response, sir." He smirked and nodded. He had no idea who he'd just struck. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories of quiet strength resonate with you, consider subscribing for more narratives about the power of discipline over rage. The first hints of dawn stretched across the horizon as 20 elite trainees stood in formation at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Their faces remained obscured by darkness and tactical gear, each figure nearly identical to the next, except for one silhouette that stood slightly apart. Not by choice, but by the subtle shifting of others away from them. An almost imperceptible gap that spoke volumes in a world where unity meant survival. Lieutenant Commander Thale Westbrook paced before them, his weathered face catching the first rays of sunlight. His boots struck the ground with precise, measured steps that matched his reputation for meticulous standards. At 42, Westbrook had served with distinction in 3 combat theaters, earning respect and fear in equal measure from those under his command. "This final phase determines who has what it takes," he announced, voice carrying across the silent yard. "Some of you," his gaze lingered in one direction, "are political experiments. Others are warriors. My job is to separate the two." The trainees remained perfectly still, but a current of tension rippled through their ranks. Everyone knew what Westbrook meant. For 17 weeks, they had endured the most demanding training program in military existence, pushing past physical and psychological breaking points that would have seemed impossible before they began. Now, in week 18, the integration program had become the unspoken focus of every evaluation. "Fall out to your assigned stations. First exercise begins in 20 minutes, Westbrook ordered, then turned to a cluster of instructors waiting nearby. "Lieutenant Braddock, observe Team 3. Pay special attention to their communication protocols." As the formation dissolved, the separate silhouette moved with a fluid efficiency that drew both admiring and suspicious glances. Lieutenant Astrid Card kept her gaze forward, ignoring the sideways looks. She had grown accustomed to being simultaneously visible and invisible during the program, scrutinized constantly, yet rarely acknowledged directly. Ghost, a trainee named Fennel, nodded as he passed. It was the only name most used for her, a nickname that had emerged during night operations when her movements proved nearly impossible to track. Some instructors shifted uncomfortably when they heard it, as though the designation carried meanings beyond simple tactical prowess. The morning exercises began with a grueling series of amphibious insertions. Each team had to navigate from sea to shore carrying full gear, establish a secure position, and then execute a complex extraction scenario. Astrid's Team 3 entered the water last, the Pacific's cold embrace a stark contrast to the warming air temperature. As they slipped beneath the surface, Petty Officer Riker whispered, "Bet they've got something special planned for us today." The words disappeared into his rebreather, but Astrid caught them. She made no response beyond a slight hand signal, directing them deeper into the murky water. 90 minutes later, as Team 3 emerged precisely at their designated extraction point, Lieutenant Braddock waited with a stopwatch and a clipboard. His expression revealed nothing as they secured their equipment and assembled for evaluation. "Explain your approach, Lieutenant," he directed at Astrid, who had led the operation. "Standard underwater traversal pattern with modified surface entry to account for the rocky outcropping, sir," she responded, voice level despite the physical exertion. "And why did your team arrive 3 minutes after Teams 1 and 2? Braddock pressed, his pen hovering over his evaluation form. Before Astrid could answer, Petty Officer Riker stepped forward slightly. "Sir, our equipment cache was relocated 50 meters from the brief position. We adjusted accordingly." Braddock's eyes narrowed. "Equipment doesn't relocate itself, Petty Officer." "No, sir," Riker agreed, exchanging a brief glance with the rest of Team 3. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Someone had deliberately altered their mission parameters without notification. It wasn't the first time Team 3 had encountered such irregularities during the program. Later that afternoon, the teams gathered for a high-stakes simulation involving hostage extraction from an enemy-held building. As the operations officers distributed communication equipment, Astrid carefully inspected her team's gear, checking each piece thoroughly before approving its use. "Paranoid much?" Lieutenant Commander Westbrook commented as he passed by, noticing her methodical inspection. "Thorough, sir," she corrected without looking up from the radio she was examining. The simulation began at 1500 hours. Teams 1 and 2 deployed first, each taking different approaches to the target building. Team 3 watched the scenarios unfold on the command center monitors, noting successful tactics and failures for their own upcoming attempt. When their turn came, they moved with practiced coordination, establishing perimeter security and communications. 10 minutes into the operation, as they approached the critical extraction phase, their communications abruptly failed. Static filled their earpieces, and their position data disappeared from command center monitors. Without hesitation, Astrid switched to the backup protocols they had established privately within the team. Using hand signals and prearranged visual cues, they completed the extraction with only a 7-minute delay from their projected timeline. As they exited the simulation area, Lieutenant Commander Westbrook waited, arms crossed and expression thunderous. The other teams had gathered to witness the debriefing, along with several senior officers who had not been present earlier. "Team 3, explain your communication failure," Westbrook demanded. Astrid stepped forward. "Sir, we adapted to equipment failure by implementing backup protocols." Westbrook circled her slowly, his posture deliberately intimidating. "Equipment doesn't just fail, Lieutenant. User error does." "With respect, sir, our diagnostic check confirmed all equipment functioning properly at mission commencement. The failure occurred simultaneously across all devices at 1517 hours. A murmur rippled through the observing teams. Simultaneous failure across multiple devices suggested deliberate interference rather than user error. Westbrook's jaw tightened. "Are you suggesting sabotage, Lieutenant Card?" "I'm reporting facts, sir. The equipment failed. We adapted. The mission was completed successfully." "With a 7-minute delay that would have resulted in casualties in a real-world scenario," Westbrook snapped. "Furthermore, your team altered the approved tactical approach without authorization." "The approved approach relied on functioning communications, sir," Astrid pointed out, her voice remaining even. "Adaptation was necessary." Westbrook stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Your team has consistently deviated from standard protocols throughout this program. One might question if someone on your team lacks the physical capability to execute operations as designed." The implication was clear to everyone present. Throughout the 17-week program, Astrid had consistently outperformed most trainees in physical evaluations, but Westbrook and certain other instructors continued to suggest that her gender made her a liability in the field. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" she requested. "Denied," Westbrook cut her off. "Team 3 will submit written explanations for today's failures by 0600 tomorrow. Dismissed." As the teams dispersed, conversations broke out in hushed tones. In the mess hall that evening, fragments of discussion drifted between tables. "They're setting them up to fail," one instructor muttered to another, "and us with them." "It's politics," came the response. "Washington wants women in combat roles whether they can handle it or not. 3 more weeks until qualification. Think she'll make it?" "Not if Westbrook has anything to say about it." Astrid sat alone, mechanically consuming her meal while appearing oblivious to the conversations around her. Years of training had taught her to simultaneously ignore and absorb everything in her environment. The discussions contained nothing she hadn't heard before, nothing she hadn't anticipated when accepting this assignment. The following morning brought an unexpected development. A black SUV with government plates arrived at the administrative building, and word quickly spread that Admiral Zephyr Haraway had arrived unannounced to observe the final qualification phases. As the highest-ranking officer involved in the Special Warfare Integration Initiative, his presence immediately altered the atmosphere at the base. Lieutenant Commander Westbrook's usual confidence appeared slightly shaken when he gathered the instructional staff for an emergency meeting. Through the partially opened blinds of the conference room, trainees caught glimpses of animated discussion and Westbrook repeatedly gesturing toward training records spread across the table. On a desk visible through another window, confidential personnel files lay open. one bearing a red, "Oversight Required" stamp across its cover. The name remained out of sight, but speculation ran wild through the barracks. The afternoon brought a grueling night operations exercise, with all teams deployed to different sectors of the training ground. Team 3 received the most remote assignment, a desolate area rarely used due to its challenging terrain and distance from support facilities. As they prepared their equipment, Petty Officer Riker approached Astrid with unusual hesitation. "Lieutenant, something feels off about tonight's op." Astrid continued checking her weapon, her movements practiced and efficient. "Elaborate, Petty Officer. This sector's been off limits since that training accident last year. Why suddenly open it now?" "Perhaps Admiral Haraway's presence has inspired renewed thoroughness," she suggested without inflection. Riker lowered his voice further. "Or perhaps someone's looking to create another accident." Astrid paused, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. "Then we'll need to be especially thorough ourselves, won't we?" The night operation proceeded under unusually close observation. Lieutenant Commander Westbrook personally monitored Team 3's progress, accompanied by 2 officers no one recognized. They followed at a distance, documenting every movement and decision with cameras and notepads. Despite the challenging conditions and constant scrutiny, Team 3 completed their objectives with textbook precision. When they returned to the staging area at 0200 hours, even Westbrook could find no obvious faults in their performance, though his expression suggested he had hoped for different results. As the teams cleaned their equipment and prepared for a brief rest period before morning exercises, Lieutenant Naomi Vega appeared at the armory. As the intelligence officer assigned to the program, her presence wasn't unusual, but her focused attention on Astrid raised eyebrows among the instructors. "Lieutenant Carda," she nodded, positioning herself to observe Astrid's weapons maintenance routine. Astrid acknowledged her with a slight nod, continuing to field strip her weapon with remarkable efficiency. Her fingers moved with a precision that spoke of thousands of hours of practice, executing a modification to the standard procedure that shaved precious seconds from the reassembly time. Vega watched with growing interest. "Where did you learn that modification?" she finally asked. "Previous deployment," Astrid responded vaguely, hands never pausing in their work. Vega's expression shifted subtly, first curiosity, then recognition, finally concern. She made a note in her tablet before departing without further comment. Later that night, while most trainees grabbed precious hours of sleep, Lieutenant Vega accessed a secure terminal in the intelligence office. Her security clearance allowed her to view most personnel files in the program, but when she searched for Astrid's complete record, she encountered unexpected restrictions. Most of the file was redacted, with only basic biographical information and current assignment details visible. Previous deployments, specialized training, and performance evaluations all appeared as black rectangles on the screen. Vega's frown deepened as she attempted to access the classified sections, only to receive multiple security warnings. Before she could try another approach, a message flashed across her screen. "Unauthorized access detected." Vega quickly closed the files and cleared her search history, but the message remained, blinking ominously. The following morning brought the first direct interaction between Admiral Haraway and the trainees. He observed morning physical training without comment, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts as he watched each team perform increasingly demanding exercises. Only when Astrid's team executed a complex extraction drill did his expression change almost imperceptibly. A slight narrowing of the eyes, a subtle shift in posture that suggested heightened interest. After showers and a quick meal, the trainees had 30 minutes of personal time before afternoon briefings. Astrid used this rare private moment to assess and treat minor injuries, standard practice for anyone in intensive training. As she applied antiseptic to an abrasion on her shoulder, the door to the women's changing area opened unexpectedly. Lieutenant Vega entered, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression of carefully controlled alarm. She glanced around to confirm they were alone before approaching Astrid. "That's a GSW extraction scar," she said quietly, gesturing to a distinctive mark on Astrid's upper shoulder that had been briefly exposed. "Special Forces medical protocol." Astrid turned slowly, pulling her t-shirt into place with deliberate calm. "Lieutenant, that's a dangerous observation. Someone's setting you up to fail," Vega continued, undeterred. "And I think I know why." She held out her tablet, displaying a communication between Westbrook and three other officers. The message discussed ways to ensure the experiment fails spectacularly and mentioned specific scenarios designed to force errors from the integration subject. Astrid's expression remained unchanged as she scanned the document, but something shifted behind her eyes. A calculation, an adjustment to mental equations that had been running since her arrival. "You've been deployed before," Vega pressed. "Combat deployed, special operations. Nothing in your accessible file supports that, but that scar and your tactical modifications tell a different story." Before Astrid could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. The base-wide intercom crackled to life. "All instructors to command center immediately. Training operation compromise. Repeat, all instructors to command center." Astrid handed the tablet back to Vega. "This conversation never happened, Lieutenant. But if they're deliberately sabotaging you, the Admiral should know." "Perhaps he already does," Astrid replied cryptically, moving toward the door. "Secure that information. We'll continue this discussion when appropriate." The compromise alert turned out to involve a perimeter security breach on the far side of the base, unrelated to the training program, but serious enough to redirect most senior personnel for the remainder of the day. The afternoon briefings were postponed, giving trainees unexpected downtime that most used for additional rest or equipment maintenance. Lieutenant Commander Westbrook, however, did not join the security response. Instead, he sequestered himself with the two unknown officers in a private conference room, their animated discussion visible, though not audible, through the glass walls. Admiral Haraway observed from a distance, his attention divided between the security situation and whatever transpired in that room. By evening, a new tension had settled over the base. Rumors circulated about the nature of the security breach, with some suggesting it had been an intentional test rather than an actual incident. Others whispered about Admiral Haraway's unusual interest in Team 3's performance metrics, which he had requested specifically during his first day on site. As trainees prepared for lights out, Petty Officer Riker approached Astrid outside the barracks, his normally confident demeanor subdued. "Lieutenant, some of us have been talking," he began carefully, "about the equipment failures, the relocated caches, all of it." Astrid waited silently, her face unreadable in the growing darkness. "It's targeted," he continued. "We all see it, but none of us understand why you're not fighting back. You outperform most of us on every metric, but you never challenge their assessments when they mark you down." "Is there a question in there, Petty Officer?" Astrid asked, her tone neutral. "I guess I'm asking why you're here, ma'am. What's this really about for you?" For a moment, something flickered across Astrid's face. Not emotion exactly, but a brief consideration of how much to reveal. "I believe in standards, not exceptions," she finally said. "Everything else is just noise." Riker studied her face, clearly unsatisfied with the answer, but recognizing he would get nothing more. "Whatever game they're playing, it's getting worse. Tomorrow's scenario is already being set up, and Scuttlebutt says Westbrook personally designed it with you in mind." "Then I should be well rested," Astrid concluded, effectively ending the conversation as she turned toward her quarters. Once alone, she removed a small notebook from a hidden pocket in her gear bag. Using a coding system that would be meaningless to anyone else, she documented the day's events, paying particular attention to Vega's discovery and the communications she had revealed. The notebook contained similar entries from every day of the program, creating a comprehensive record that contradicted many official assessments. The following morning began with ominous clouds gathering over the ocean, matching the atmosphere that had descended upon the training facility. Admiral Haraway had summoned Lieutenant Commander Westbrook for a private meeting before dawn, and Westbrook emerged from the Admiral's temporary office with a rigid posture and tightly controlled expression that suggested the conversation had not gone as he expected. The command briefing was scheduled for 800 hours, with all teams and instructors gathered in the main tactical planning room. Large screens displayed satellite imagery of a coastal compound, with approach vectors and security parameters highlighted in various colors. Admiral Haraway sat at the back of the room, observing silently as Lieutenant Commander Westbrook took position at the front. "Today's scenario involves a high-value extraction under hostile conditions," Westbrook began, his voice carrying the crisp authority that had earned him respect throughout his career. "Team assignments have been adjusted based on performance assessments to date. The room tensed slightly at this unexpected change. Team compositions had remained consistent throughout the program, allowing for the development of the communication, shorthand, and mutual trust, essential to special operations. Team 3 will operate independently, with Lieutenant Card as mission commander, Westbrook continued, bringing up a separate tactical display. Your objective is the extraction of an intelligence asset from this secured facility. The asset is under guard and presumed uncooperative. The scenario he outlined was notably more complex than those assigned to the other teams, with significantly less intelligence provided and more unknown variables. As Westbrook detailed the mission parameters, several instructors exchanged glances that suggested this disparity had not been part of the original training plan. When Astrid quietly suggested an alternative approach based on the limited intelligence available, Westbrook cut her off immediately. Perhaps if you spent less time questioning orders and more time building physical strength, your team wouldn't be compensating for your weaknesses, he said sharply, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly silent room. Admiral Haraway shifted slightly in his chair, but made no comment as uncomfortable silence filled the space. Astrid's expression remained impassive, her posture perfect despite the public rebuke. Teams will deploy at staggered intervals beginning at 09:30 hours, Westbrook concluded. Briefing materials are available on your tactical tablets. Dismissed. As the teams dispersed to prepare, Lieutenant Vega caught Astrid's eye and gave an almost imperceptible head tilt toward a side corridor. Once out of sight of the main group, she handed Astrid a sealed envelope. "Additional intelligence relevant to your scenario," she said formally, loud enough for others to hear if they were nearby. Then, dropping her voice to a whisper, "The communication equipment they've assigned to your team has been modified. I can't determine how, but the alterations were made last night under Westbrook's authorization." Astrid took the envelope with a standard acknowledgement, giving no indication she had heard the warning. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll review this immediately." Team 3 gathered in their preparation area, examining the briefing materials with professional focus. Without directly acknowledging Vega's warning, Astrid instituted a communications protocol that included redundant systems and visual confirmation requirements that would mitigate potential equipment failure. "Seems like overkill for a training op," one team member commented. "There's no such thing as overkill in preparation," Astrid responded, "only in execution." The simulation began precisely at 09:30 hours, with Teams 1 and 2 deploying to their less complex scenarios. Team 3's deployment was scheduled for 10:45, giving them time to observe the other operations and refine their approach. Admiral Haraway positioned himself in the command center, where he could monitor all 3 scenarios simultaneously. At 10:43, just before Team 3's deployment, Lieutenant Commander Westbrook approached Astrid with a last-minute update. "Intelligence indicates the asset has been moved to this secondary location," he said, marking a new position on her tactical map. "Adjust your insertion point accordingly." The change required a complete reconfiguration of their approach, negating much of their preparation. Astrid acknowledged the update without comment and quickly revised the team's plan, aware that such late intelligence changes were rare but not unprecedented in real operations. Team 3 deployed at 10:50, moving with coordinated efficiency despite the last-minute alterations. They reached their new insertion point at the expected time and established communications with the command center. Everything functioned normally for the first 17 minutes of the operation. Then, as they approached the critical phase of asset identification, their communications failed catastrophically. Not just static or interference, but complete system shutdown across all primary channels. Astrid immediately implemented their backup protocol, but found that even their redundant systems had been compromised. In the command center, the monitors tracking Team 3 went dark. Murmurs of concern spread among the observing instructors as Westbrook calmly announced a realistic communications failure scenario that the team would need to overcome. Admiral Haraway's expression darkened slightly. "Was this failure part of the original simulation parameters, Lieutenant Commander?" "Adaptability is a key assessment criterion, Admiral," Westbrook replied without directly answering the question. On the ground, Team 3 continued their mission using only hand signals and pre-established contingencies. They located the supposed asset, a weighted training dummy, and began the extraction process. Halfway through, they encountered an unexpected hostile force of instructors playing opposition, at 3 times the number specified in the briefing materials. Despite these complications, they completed the extraction and reached their designated exfiltration point only 12 minutes behind their projected timeline. When their communications suddenly reactivated upon mission completion, Astrid's only transmission was a terse, Team 3, mission complete, returning to base. The debriefing was scheduled immediately upon their return. All teams and training staff gathered in the main briefing room, with Admiral Haraway prominently positioned near the front. The atmosphere crackled with tension as Lieutenant Commander Westbrook took his place at the briefing podium. Teams 1 and 2 completed their objectives within acceptable parameters, he began, displaying performance metrics on the main screen. Team 3 failed to meet mission timelines and deviated significantly from approved tactical approaches. He turned his attention directly to Astrid, who stood at perfect attention before him. Lieutenant Card, explain your team's communication failures. Sir, all communication systems failed simultaneously at 1107 hours, she responded evenly. We implemented backup protocols and completed the mission objective. With a 12-minute delay that would have endangered both the asset and your team in a real-world scenario, Westbrook countered, his voice rising slightly. Furthermore, your extraction route violated the parameters established in the briefing. The parameters became untenable when opposition forces tripled from the briefed numbers, sir, Astrid pointed out, her tone remaining professional despite the increasingly hostile questioning. Westbrook's expression hardened as he stepped closer. Are you suggesting the training scenario was unfair, Lieutenant? I'm reporting factual discrepancies between briefed parameters and field conditions, sir. The mission was completed successfully, despite those discrepancies. The room had grown completely silent, every eye fixed on the confrontation unfolding before them. Westbrook began a systematic dismantling of Team 3's performance, focusing particularly on decisions Astrid had made during the communications blackout. His critique became increasingly personal as it continued. This is what happens when standards are lowered, he announced to the room at large, when politics override combat readiness. His voice rose with each point. When we pretend that biological differences don't matter in life or death situations. Throughout this public dressing down, Astrid maintained perfect composure, her posture regulation perfect, despite the humiliation being inflicted. Several team members shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to defend their lieutenant, but constrained by military protocol. Admiral Haraway watched the scene unfold with an unreadable expression, making no move to intervene despite the increasingly inappropriate nature of Westbrook's comments. Frustrated by Astrid's continued composure, Westbrook stepped directly into her personal space, close enough that she could feel his breath. Your presence endangers real operators. Your failure today would have cost lives in the field. He delivered his final insult with cold precision. The battlefield doesn't care about diversity quotas. Then, in a move that shocked everyone present, he punctuated his statement with a deliberate, open-handed slap across her face. The sound echoed through the suddenly frozen room. No one breathed, no one moved. For the first time, those present clearly saw Astrid's face, not shocked, not angry, but calculating in a way that sent chills through those who recognized the expression. Her eyes shifted briefly to Admiral Haraway, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. She spoke with unnerving calm. Permission to demonstrate proper response, sir. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Vega had slipped away during the confrontation, using the distraction to access a restricted terminal with borrowed credentials. With quick, practiced movements, she navigated through security protocols to a classified database that required authorization well above her normal clearance. What she found made her eyes widen in disbelief. Fragments of classified mission reports featuring Astrid's name appeared on the screen. Photographs showed a covert operation in the South China Sea. Phrases like unprecedented, extraction successful, and recommend highest commendation flashed before her eyes before the system suddenly locked her out. A red warning appeared. Security breach detected. Location, Terminal 5. Vega quickly logged out and exited the intelligence office, passing security personnel heading toward the terminal she had just used. She hurried back. Toward the briefing room, a new understanding dawning on her face. In the briefing room, Westbrook smirked at Astrid's request, clearly thinking the confrontation finished. By all means, Lieutenant, show us your proper response. The other instructors exchanged nervous glances. One whispered to another, "He doesn't know, does he?" Admiral Haraway shifted his position slightly, giving himself a clearer view of what was about to unfold. Astrid stepped back exactly 3 measured paces and assumed a neutral stance. Her voice carried clearly through the silent room as she stated formally, "For the record, sir, I am now demonstrating standard countermeasures against hostile aggression." The room went completely still as she moved with startling speed and precision. Each movement was controlled, almost choreographed in its perfection. Westbrook's expression transformed from smugness to shock to dawning fear within seconds. Just as she was about to complete the takedown, the doors burst open. Security personnel entered with weapons drawn, led by the base security chief. "Security breach in progress," he announced tersely. "Admiral Haraway, we need to lock down this facility." The Admiral raised his hand calmly. "Stand down. What you're witnessing isn't a breach." He turned to face the room, his authoritative presence commanding instant attention. "It's a revelation. Have you ever witnessed someone maintain perfect composure through unjust treatment, only to reveal extraordinary strength when it mattered most? Share your thoughts below about standing firm in the face of doubters." With security personnel standing by, Astrid completed her demonstration with surgical precision. In 17 controlled seconds, she neutralized Westbrook with a series of expert movements that displayed years of advanced training. Each motion was textbook perfect, controlled, measured, and deliberately non-injurious. She could have broken bones, but chose restraint, demonstrating mastery rather than vengeance. Westbrook found himself on the ground, his wrists locked in a submission hold, and his throat pinned by her knee. The position immobilized him completely while causing minimal discomfort. A professional restraint technique rather than a retaliatory attack. The room remained frozen in shock, not at the takedown itself, but at the level of expertise it revealed. This was not the performance of someone who had learned defensive tactics during standard training. This was the muscle memory of an operator with thousands of hours of specialized combat experience. Admiral Haraway stepped forward as Astrid released Westbrook and returned to a position of attention. The Admiral's weathered face held no surprise, only grim satisfaction as he addressed the stunned room. "Lieutenant Commander, you just assaulted an active-duty Navy SEAL," he announced, his voice carrying clearly to every corner. "Lieutenant Card isn't part of your integration program. She's been a SEAL for 3 years with 2 classified deployments." Murmurs of disbelief spread through the trainees as Westbrook struggled to his feet, his face pale with shock and dawning comprehension. Lieutenant Card was assigned to evaluate this training unit's readiness for actual integration next year, Admiral Haraway continued. Instead, she uncovered systematic sabotage of the program. The door opened again as Lieutenant Vega entered, tablet in hand. Her expression was composed, but her eyes betrayed excitement as she approached the Admiral. "Sir, I have the evidence you requested." She connected her tablet to the main display system, projecting communications between Westbrook and 3 senior officers at the Pentagon. The messages detailed plans to ensure female candidates failed qualification regardless of performance, with specific instructions to target the prime integration subject, with escalating challenges designed to force failure. They specifically targeted Lieutenant Carde, Vega explained, unaware of her actual status and experience. The evidence was damning. Dates, times, and specific instructions for equipment tampering, intelligence manipulation, and evaluation bias. Several instructors shifted uncomfortably as they recognized scenarios they had helped implement, now revealed as part of a coordinated campaign, rather than legitimate training challenges. Admiral Haraway turned to Westbrook, who stood rigidly at attention, his military bearing reasserted despite his humiliation. "Do you know why Lieutenant Card was selected for this assignment? Show him, Lieutenant Vega." Vega manipulated her tablet, bringing up a classified file that had required her emergency override to access. The display showed Astrid's service record, heavily redacted but with key operations visible. The Malaysian ambassador's daughter extraction, 72 hours holding position under enemy fire when her extraction team was compromised. 3 other missions deemed impossible before her involvement. "Lieutenant Card is not an experiment, Lieutenant Commander," Admiral Haraway stated flatly. "She's the standard by which we'll measure the program's success." The room absorbed this revelation in stunned silence. Trainees who had dismissed or avoided Astrid now stared with new understanding. Instructors who had participated in the sabotage campaign looked distinctly uncomfortable as they realized the implications for their careers. Astrid herself remained at perfect attention, her expression betraying nothing of her thoughts. She turned to face Westbrook, who now stood hunched and diminished despite his attempt at military bearing. With deliberate care, she reached out and straightened his uniform collar, which had been disarranged during the takedown. Then she saluted with perfect form, her movements precise and respectful despite what had transpired. "Never strike a Navy SEAL, sir," she stated. The words carried no anger, just professional correction, as though she were advising on proper equipment maintenance rather than responding to a personal assault. Security personnel moved forward at a signal from Admiral Haraway, flanking Westbrook. "Lieutenant Commander Westbrook, you are relieved of duty pending investigation. These officers will escort you to your quarters, where you will remain until further notice." As Westbrook was led away, his previously commanding presence reduced to a stiff, mechanical walk between security escorts. Admiral Haraway addressed the remaining personnel. "This program continues as planned," he announced firmly. "Lieutenant Card will assume instructional duties for the remainder of the qualification phase. Those of you who participated in or were aware of the sabotage efforts will be subject to individual review." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Some of you knew what was happening and said nothing. Complicity isn't leadership. Remember that as you consider your future in naval special warfare." The briefing concluded with tense instructions for revised scheduling. As personnel filed out, subdued conversations broke out among the trainees, processing the revelations that had upended everything they thought they knew about the program. Several approached Astrid cautiously, their previous avoidance replaced with awkward respect. "Lieutenant," Petty Officer Riker said, speaking for several of them, "we owe you an apology." Astrid shook her head slightly. "You owe me nothing except your best performance. This wasn't about me. It was about the integrity of the program. But the sabotage, the equipment failures, all of it," another trainee protested. "You knew and still performed to standard." "Standards exist regardless of circumstances," she replied simply. "That's the point." Later that evening, Admiral Haraway summoned Astrid to his temporary office. The space reflected his no-nonsense approach: functional furnishings, minimal personal items, and a desk covered with meticulously organized documents. "Sit, Lieutenant," he instructed, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Astrid complied, maintaining perfect posture, even in the relative privacy of the office. Her face showed slight fatigue, the only visible indication of the day's extraordinary events. "Your assessment," Haraway stated, not a question, but a command. "The program is viable, sir," she responded immediately. Despite coordinated interference, 8 of the 12 trainees demonstrate the physical and psychological attributes required for special warfare operations. With proper leadership and evaluation, I estimate 6 will meet qualification standards. "And the instructional cadre?" "Compromised, sir. 4 instructors actively participated in sabotage efforts. 3 others were aware, but did not intervene. The remaining 5 appear uninvolved, but demonstrated bias in evaluations." Haraway nodded, making notes in a file. "And Lieutenant Vega?" "An asset, sir. She identified irregularities independently and pursued investigation at personal risk. Her security breach was in service to operational integrity." "I've already addressed that matter," Haraway assured her. "No disciplinary action will be taken given the circumstances." He closed the file and studied her for a moment. "You maintained your cover despite extreme provocation. Some might have revealed their status earlier to prevent the escalation we witnessed today." "Revealing my status would have compromised the assessment, sir," Astrid pointed out. "The program needed to be tested under realistic conditions, including institutional resistance. Even at the cost of your own dignity?" "Dignity isn't the mission, sir. Accurate evaluation is." Haraway's weathered face showed a flicker of something like approval. 3 more weeks until qualification. You'll oversee the remaining phases as lead instructor. I've authorized you to restructure the program as needed, with Lieutenant Vega as your intelligence support." "Yes, sir." As she rose to leave, Haraway added, "The Malaysian ambassador asked about you when I was in Singapore last month. His daughter is attending university now. Engineering." For the first time, something soft flickered across Astrid's face. Not quite a smile, but a momentary easing of her professional mask. That's good to hear, sir. Sometimes we need to remember why the standards matter, Lieutenant. They always matter, sir. That's why they're standards. The following morning brought dramatic changes to the training program. Astrid assembled the instructional staff at 500 before the trainees' scheduled wake-up. Her approach was direct and uncompromising. Effective immediately, all training scenarios will be reset to standard special warfare protocols, she announced. Previous performance evaluations are nullified. Qualification will be determined solely on performance during these final weeks. The instructors received this news with varying reactions. Relief from some, resentment from others who had been part of Westbrook's inner circle. One senior instructor, Chief Petty Officer Landon, raised an objection. With respect, Lieutenant, this undermines the entire evaluation process. 17 weeks of assessment discarded on the word of one officer? Not discarded, Chief, Astrid corrected. Contextualized. You're welcome to review Lieutenant Vega's evidence regarding systematic evaluation tampering. Landon's face tightened. Some of us believed we were maintaining necessary standards. Standards are measured objectively, Chief, not manipulated to achieve predetermined outcomes. She held his gaze until he looked away. Each of you has a decision to make. Participate in legitimate evaluation going forward, or request reassignment now. There will be no disciplinary action for those who choose to step aside voluntarily. By Aero 700, 3 instructors had requested reassignment, including Chief Landon. The remaining staff, regardless of their private reservations, committed to the restructured program. Whether this represented genuine conversion or simply pragmatic career protection remained to be seen. When the trainees assembled for morning physical training, they found Astrid waiting in full exercise gear rather than the instructional uniform they expected. Today we reset, she announced without preamble. I'll complete every evolution alongside you. Standard times, standard weights, standard distances. No advantages, no handicaps, just the requirements as written. She paused, looking at each trainee in turn. Some of you have questions about my presence here, about what it means for the program and for special warfare. Those questions are legitimate, but they're also irrelevant to your performance. Your job is to meet the standard. My job is to ensure the standard is applied fairly. What followed was the most grueling training session many had experienced, not because the requirements had changed, but because they were now implemented exactly as written in special warfare doctrine. Astrid completed each evolution alongside the trainees, her performance neither showcased nor minimized, simply executed to standard with the same expectations applied to everyone. By midday, a new dynamic had emerged. The artificial divisions fostered by the previous regime began to dissolve as trainees focused on performance rather than politics. Those who had struggled under biased evaluation found themselves succeeding when proper techniques were taught correctly. Those who had benefited from favoritism discovered gaps in their training that now needed to be addressed. Lieutenant Vega observed these developments with keen interest, documenting the transformation for official records. During a brief break between evolutions, she approached Astrid with a data tablet. The restructured program is already showing results, she noted. Performance metrics have improved across all teams. Astrid nodded, reviewing the data while maintaining awareness of the trainees regrouping for the next exercise. The standard works when it's actually the standard. That's what I don't understand about Westbrook's approach, Vega admitted. If the goal was to prove women couldn't meet the standard, why not simply apply it correctly and let natural selection occur? Why the sabotage? Because he feared it wouldn't work, Astrid replied simply. That qualified candidates would succeed regardless of gender, undermining his fundamental assumptions. Vega considered this. So, it was never about standards. It rarely is when people invoke them selectively. The afternoon brought tactical scenarios redesigned to focus on actual special warfare requirements, rather than the manufactured challenges of previous weeks. Teams were reconfigured based on complementary skills, rather than the artificial groupings Westbrook had imposed. As a result, operational efficiency improved dramatically, with all teams completing objectives, within expected parameters. During the evening meal, an unusual sight greeted personnel entering the mess hall. Admiral Haraway sat at a table with Astrid and Lieutenant Vega, engaged in what appeared to be casual conversation rather than a formal briefing. This unprecedented accessibility from a flag officer sent ripples through the ranks. with many speculating about its significance. "Is it true you're joining us for tomorrow's water evolution, Admiral?" one brave trainee asked when Haraway acknowledged their table. "Observing only," the Admiral replied with a slight smile. "Some standards I no longer need to meet personally to understand their importance." As the meal concluded, Petty Officer Riker approached Astrid with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Lieutenant, some of us were wondering about your previous deployments, the ones mentioned today." "Classified, Petty Officer," she responded predictably. "Of course, ma'am. It's just the Malaysian ambassador's daughter extraction was referenced as something you led, but that operation was credited to SEAL Team 6 in the briefings we received last year." Astrid met his gaze steadily. "Official attributions don't always reflect operational reality, Petty Officer. That's something you'll learn if you qualify for certain assignments." The implication hung in the air, raising more questions than it answered. As Riker rejoined his teammates, their discussion took on a new intensity, with frequent glances toward Astrid that combined curiosity with growing respect. Lieutenant Vega caught up with Astrid as she left the mess hall. "You know you've just become a legend in the barracks," she commented, falling into step beside her. "The mystery SEAL who operated under the radar for years." "Legends are counterproductive," Astrid replied. "The program needs to focus on capability, not personalities." "That ship has sailed, Lieutenant. Like it or not, you've become the proof of concept." Astrid stopped walking, turning to face Vega directly. "Then that's a failure on my part. This isn't about proving women can be SEALs. It's about ensuring that anyone who meets the standard can serve, regardless of preconceptions." Vega studied her with newfound understanding. "That's why you didn't reveal yourself earlier, even when things got ugly. You needed to expose the systemic issues, not just win personal vindication." "The next candidates won't have classified backgrounds to protect them," Astrid pointed out. "They'll need a program with integrity, not just a precedent." The following morning brought unexpected developments. As trainees assembled for the day's water evolution, they discovered that all communications and navigation equipment had been removed from the preparation area. "Today's exercise focuses on core competencies," Astrid announced. "No comms, no GPS, no support technologies. You'll navigate by natural references and communicate using established visual signals only." The challenge was clear. This would test whether the trainees had developed fundamental skills or had become reliant on technology and external guidance. It would also eliminate the possibility of technological sabotage that had plagued previous exercises. As the teams prepared for deployment, Admiral Haraway arrived with an entourage of officers no one recognized. Their insignia identified them as members of the Naval Special Warfare Command Staff, the highest echelon of SEAL leadership and oversight. "These officers will observe today's evolution," the Admiral informed the instructional staff. "They have full access to all aspects of the exercise. Lieutenant Card remains in operational command." The presence of such senior leadership created a new pressure that Astrid acknowledged directly in her final briefing. "You'll notice we have distinguished visitors today. Consider this valuable preparation for real-world operations, where political considerations often accompany tactical requirements. Focus on your mission, not your audience." The evolution unfolded with remarkable efficiency. Without technological distractions, the teams demonstrated superior situational awareness and adaptive decision-making. The senior officers observed with professional interest, occasionally conferring with Admiral Haraway, but offering no direct feedback to the participants. When the exercise concluded, the visiting staff departed without formal comment, leaving many wondering about the purpose of their observation. Only Admiral Haraway remained, joining Astrid for the debriefing session. "Your assessment, Lieutenant," he prompted after the technical review was complete. "All teams demonstrated core competency," she responded formally. "Teams 2 and 4 showed exceptional adaptation to changing conditions. Teams 1 and 3 need additional work on non-verbal communication protocols, but met minimum standards." "And if you were selecting for an operational team right now?" Astrid considered the question carefully, aware that her answer would carry significant weight. 8 individuals are currently qualified for operational consideration, sir. 4 more show potential with additional specialized training. Gender distribution? Irrelevant to the assessment, sir. The qualified candidates met identical standards. Haraway nodded, apparently satisfied with her response. "The command staff will review your full evaluation by week's end. Expect additional observers for the remainder of the qualification phase. After the Admiral departed, the training schedule continued with tactical planning exercises. Astrid divided the trainees into new team configurations, deliberately mixing those who had previously avoided working together. This forced collaboration revealed both strengths and weaknesses that had been obscured by the artificial groupings imposed under Westbrook's system. During an afternoon break, Lieutenant Vega approached with new information. You should know that 3 congressional staffers will be observing tomorrow's evolution, she informed Astrid privately. The Armed Services Committee has taken interest in the program. Astrid absorbed this news without visible reaction. Political oversight was inevitable. Have they specified any particular focus areas? Not officially, but back-channel communications suggest they're specifically interested in your role and background. Unfortunate. The program should be the focus, not individuals. Vega hesitated, then added, There's more. Westbrook has filed a formal complaint alleging you used excessive force during the demonstration incident. He's claiming temporary injury and professional humiliation. This finally provoked a reaction, a slight narrowing of Astrid's eyes, the only visible sign of her displeasure. That's his right. The video evidence will speak for itself. There's no video evidence, Lieutenant. The security footage from that session was never archived. System malfunction, apparently. Convenient, Astrid observed. Admiral Haraway? Aware and unconcerned, according to his aide. He called it predictable desperation. The implications were clear. Without video evidence, the situation became Westbrook's word against Astrid's, potentially complicating the already politically charged environment surrounding the program. The timing, just before a congressional observation, suggested a calculated attempt to undermine her authority. That evening, as Astrid reviewed the next day's training plan in her office, a knock at the door revealed Petty Officer Riker and 2 other senior trainees. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" Riker requested formally. "Granted," Astrid replied, setting aside her work. "The company is aware of Lieutenant Commander Westbrook's complaint," Riker stated. "We want you to know that every trainee who witnessed the incident is prepared to provide sworn statements regarding what actually occurred." Astrid studied them carefully. "That's a significant offer, Petty Officer. One that could have career implications depending on how this situation evolves. With respect, ma'am, so does standing by while false accusations go unchallenged. You've shown us what integrity looks like in this program. We're just following that example." For the first time, something approaching warmth appeared briefly in Astrid's expression. "I appreciate the offer, but this situation will resolve through proper channels. Focus on your qualification requirements, not administrative distractions." After they departed, Astrid remained at her desk, considering the implications of this development. The trainees' willingness to stand together represented a fundamental shift in the program's culture, exactly the kind of cohesion and integrity she had been tasked with evaluating. Perhaps Westbrook's final act of sabotage would inadvertently prove the program's success. The following day brought clear skies and the promised congressional observers, 2 men and 1 woman in civilian business attire, accompanied by military escorts. Admiral Haraway personally introduced them to the instructional staff, with particular attention to Astrid's role as lead instructor. "Lieutenant Card has implemented significant program improvements over the past week," he informed them. "Today's evolution will demonstrate the current training standards and assessment methodology." The female observer, who introduced herself as Dr. Kamala Rao from the Congressional Research Service, showed particular interest in the restructured program. "I understand there were some, shall we say, irregularities in the previous implementation. Those matters are under separate investigation," Admiral Haraway replied smoothly. "Lieutenant Card can address the current standards and their application." Astrid provided a concise briefing on the day's evolution, a complex extraction scenario involving multiple variables and limited intelligence. Unlike previous exercises, this one would be conducted with full transparency, with observers welcome at all stages of planning and execution. As the trainees deployed, Dr. Rao positioned herself near Astrid in the command center. "Off the record, Lieutenant, your background has attracted significant attention in certain circles. 3 years as an active SEAL without public acknowledgement represents an unusual career path." "My assignment history is classified, ma'am," Astrid responded correctly. Admiral Haraway can address any questions regarding program structure and personnel selection. Of course, Dr. Rao smiled slightly. I just find it interesting that the Navy chose to reveal your status now, in this particular context. Some might see it as a publicity maneuver. The revelation was not planned, Astrid corrected her. It became necessary due to circumstances that compromised the evaluation process. Before Dr. Rao could pursue this line of questioning further, activity on the main tactical display drew their attention. Team 2 had encountered an unexpected obstacle during their approach, a simulated civilian presence in what should have been a secured area. The team leader paused the operation, requesting guidance. Astrid stepped to the communications station. Team 2, assess civilian status and proceed according to ROE Scenario 3. This is a real-world consideration, not a test modification. Her calm handling of the situation impressed the observers, particularly when the team successfully adapted their approach without compromising mission objectives. Throughout the remainder of the exercise, similar realistic complications were introduced, testing the trainees' decision-making under pressure rather than their ability to follow rigid protocols. When the evolution concluded, Admiral Haraway invited the congressional observers to participate in the debriefing session. Dr. Rao accepted immediately, while her colleagues opted to observe from a distance. During the debriefing, Astrid maintained a clinical focus on performance metrics and tactical decisions, avoiding both praise and criticism in favor of objective assessment. She called on trainees to evaluate their own performance before offering instructor feedback, creating a collaborative review process that contrasted sharply with Westbrook's authoritarian approach. Dr. Rao observed this methodology with evident interest. When the formal debriefing concluded, she approached Astrid again. Your instructional style is notably different from traditional special warfare methods, Lieutenant. The methods serve the standards, ma'am, Astrid replied. If different approaches achieve better results, adaptation is appropriate. And has your approach achieved better results? Astrid gestured to the performance metrics displayed on the main screen. The data speaks for itself. Average qualification scores have increased 17% since program restructuring, with improvement across all assessment categories. Impressive, Dr. Rao acknowledged. Though I understand not everyone appreciates your methods, Lieutenant Commander Westbrook's complaint has reached the committee's attention. That's an administrative matter, ma'am, not an operational concern. Dr. Rao studied her with renewed interest. You maintain remarkable compartmentalization, Lieutenant. Most officers would find such accusations at least somewhat distracting. Focus is a core requirement in special warfare, ma'am. Distractions get people killed. After the congressional delegation departed, Admiral Haraway summoned Astrid to a private meeting in his office. The space had changed since their last meeting. Additional security measures were visible, and a signal jammer now sat prominently on the desk. The situation has evolved, Lieutenant, he informed her once the door was secured. Westbrook's complaint was a diversion. His real move was contacting the Washington Post with allegations about a secret female SEAL program operating outside normal oversight channels. Astrid absorbed this information with her customary composure. Has the story run? Not yet. The Pentagon's media liaison is attempting to contain it, but we should prepare for public exposure within the next 48 hours. How will this affect the program, sir? That depends on how we manage it, Haraway replied, activating the signal jammer before continuing. What I'm about to share is classified at the highest levels. Your participation in this program was not just about evaluation. It was about establishing precedent for the integration of special units beyond the SEALs. He removed a secure tablet from his desk drawer and handed it to her. The screen displayed operational plans for a new multi-service special operations unit with a focus on intelligence gathering and asymmetric warfare. The personnel requirements specifically noted the need for operators with specialized physical and cognitive attributes, not typically prioritized in traditional special operations selection. Discrete integration has always been the long-term objective, Haraway explained. Westbrook and his allies somehow caught wind of this broader initiative and attempted to discredit it by undermining your program. Which explains the coordinated resistance, Astrid noted, scanning the operational details with professional interest. They saw this as a larger threat than simple gender integration. Precisely, and now we have a decision to make. If your identity becomes public, you could become the face of this initiative, for better or worse. That would be counterproductive, sir. Personalization invites political manipulation rather than objective assessment. Haraway nodded, having clearly expected this response. Then, we need an alternative approach. The congressional observers were impressed with your program reforms, particularly Dr. Rao. She's proposed a formal review that would validate the current standards while avoiding focus on individual operators. That sounds appropriate, sir. It would require your continued involvement as program administrator, possibly for an extended period. Astrid considered this implication. Extended administrative duty would mean postponing return to operational status, a significant career adjustment for someone with her specialized training. If that serves the mission requirements, sir, I'm available. Good. There's one more complication. Westbrook has secured support from several retired flag officers who object to the entire integration concept. They're prepared to go public with critiques of both the program and your qualifications. For the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed Astrid's face. Not anger, but something more complex. My service record speaks for itself, sir. Your classified record does, Haraway corrected. Your public record shows only conventional assignments with standard evaluations, nothing that would counterbalance their claims. Declassification isn't an option for the operations in question. No, but there is one mission that could be partially declassified without compromising ongoing operations or methods. Haraway retrieved another file from his secure drawer. The Malaysian extraction, the ambassador has privately requested permission to acknowledge your role, as a matter of personal gratitude, if nothing else. Astrid's expression remained neutral, but her posture shifted subtly, a tension visible only to someone familiar with her typical perfect composure. That operation involved other personnel whose identities must remain protected, sir. We're aware. The declassification would acknowledge only your leadership role and the successful outcome, with all operational details and other personnel remaining classified. Just enough to establish your credentials without compromising security. She considered this carefully. If the ambassador feels it appropriate, I have no objection on professional grounds. Haraway studied her with experienced eyes. And on personal grounds, Lieutenant? Personal considerations aren't relevant to operational decisions, sir. In this case, they might be. Your public identity will change if this proceeds. That has implications beyond your military role. Astrid met his gaze directly. With respect, Admiral, I accepted those implications when I volunteered for the SEAL qualification program 3 years ago. Public recognition was never the objective, but neither is it a deterrent to completing the mission. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent knock. Lieutenant Vega entered without waiting for permission, her expression conveying the urgency of her message. Sir, the Washington Post has just published online. Secret Female SEAL Program Exposed is the headline. They're naming Lieutenant Card specifically and quoting anonymous sources claiming special treatment and lowered standards. Haraway's face darkened. Sooner than expected. They've bypassed standard Pentagon press protocols. There's more, sir, Vega continued, her voice tight. Social media is already reacting. Lieutenant Commander Westbrook has given a video interview to a military affairs podcast, describing the incident in the briefing room with significant alterations to the actual events. Show me, Haraway ordered. Vega activated the office display screen, bringing up the video interview. Westbrook appeared composed and professional, his uniform immaculate as he described a scenario bearing little resemblance to what had actually occurred. Lieutenant Card became agitated during a standard performance review, he claimed with convincing sincerity. When I attempted to redirect her to professional standards, she executed an unprovoked physical attack that required medical attention afterward. This behavior exemplifies the emotional instability that makes the female integration program fundamentally unsound. The interviewer, clearly sympathetic to this perspective, asked leading questions that allowed Westbrook to expand his narrative. The political pressure to push this program forward has overridden basic operational safety considerations. My concern has always been for the combat readiness of our special operations teams. As the video continued, Astrid watched with the same composed expression she had maintained throughout the actual confrontation. Only the slightest tightening around her eyes betrayed any reaction to the blatant misrepresentation of events. We need to respond immediately, Vega urged. Every minute this narrative circulates unchallenged does more damage. Admiral Haraway turned to Astrid. Your recommendation, Lieutenant? She considered the situation with characteristic thoroughness before responding. Standard operational protocol when compromised, neither confirm nor deny specific details, redirect to mission objectives, and continue execution while security reassesses. Haraway nodded slowly. In other words, proceed with the program as planned, while Naval Public Affairs handles the media response. Yes, sir. Engaging directly with misinformation only legitimizes it. The program's results will provide more effective refutation than any statement. Vega looked dissatisfied with this approach. But the trainees will see this. The instructors, too. It could undermine your authority at a critical phase of qualification. If my authority depends on public perception rather than demonstrated competence, then I've failed as a leader, Astrid replied simply. The trainees who have worked with me since the restructuring know the truth. Those are the only opinions relevant to mission success. As they discussed response options, another alert sounded from Vega's tablet. Sir, CNN is now running with the story. They're requesting official comment from Naval Special Warfare Command and have reached out directly to personnel on base. The situation was escalating rapidly, transforming from an internal military matter to a public controversy with potential political implications. Admiral Haraway made a quick decision. Lieutenant Vega, implement communication protocols Alpha 7. No personnel are authorized to speak with media. Lieutenant Card, proceed with tomorrow's training evolution exactly as planned. I'll handle the command response. As Vega departed to implement these instructions, Haraway turned to Astrid with unusual gravity. This will get worse before it gets better, Lieutenant. Westbrook and his allies are well connected and motivated. Understanding the opposition's resources is part of tactical assessment, sir. We'll adapt accordingly. There's a personal cost to being at the center of this kind of controversy, Haraway warned, one you may not have calculated when you accepted this assignment. For the first time, something like grim humor flickered across Astrid's face. With respect, Admiral, holding position under enemy fire for 72 hours provided excellent preparation for weathering a media storm. As she left the Admiral's office, Astrid moved through the base with her usual purposeful efficiency, ignoring the sudden hush that fell over groups of personnel as she passed. News traveled quickly in military circles, and the Washington Post article had clearly reached the base despite official communication restrictions. She entered the tactical planning room to find the next day's evolution already being prepared by the instructional staff. Their reactions to her arrival ranged from uncomfortable avoidance to deliberate professionalism, but no one directly acknowledged the breaking news story. Proceed with the standard briefing, she instructed, taking her usual position. Tomorrow's evolution remains unchanged. As the senior instructor began reviewing the tactical scenario, the door opened again to admit Dr. Rao, unexpectedly returned without her congressional colleagues. Lieutenant Card, she interrupted without apology. I need to speak with you immediately regarding developments that impact our oversight role. Astrid nodded to the instructor to continue the briefing, then stepped aside with Dr. Rao. Ma'am, we're in the middle of operational planning. Perhaps we could schedule this discussion for a more appropriate time. There is no more appropriate time, Lieutenant, Dr. Rao replied quietly. The House Armed Services Committee has called an emergency session for tomorrow morning. They're requesting your presence to testify about the program and respond to the allegations being made against both you and the Naval Special Warfare Integration Initiative. This development represented a significant escalation beyond media coverage. Congressional testimony would create an official record and potentially impact military policy at the highest levels. I'll need to consult with Admiral Haraway regarding this request, Astrid responded, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the gravity of the situation. The Admiral has already been notified, Dr. Rao informed her. This isn't just a request, Lieutenant. The committee has indicated they will issue a subpoena if necessary. The implications were clear. What had begun as a training program evaluation had escalated into a political confrontation with potential consequences for the entire special warfare community. Astrid's response would now extend far beyond the confines of this base, potentially shaping military integration policy for years to come. I understand, ma'am, she acknowledged. When is my testimony required? A Navy transport is standing by to depart at 2200 hours. You'll need to prepare immediately. The training room had gone silent. The briefing paused as everyone strained to overhear this conversation. Astrid turned back to the instructional staff, aware that her next words would set the tone for the program's continuation in her absence. Lieutenant Vega will assume temporary command of the training program, she announced calmly. All evolutions will proceed as scheduled. Qualification standards remain unchanged. As the instructors absorbed this directive, Astrid addressed the senior trainee, Petty Officer Riker. The true measure of this program will be your performance, not political debates or media coverage. Remember that when I'm not here to remind you. Riker straightened to attention. Understood, ma'am. As Astrid moved to leave, Dr. Rao at her side, the door burst open again. A young communications officer rushed in, breathless with urgency. Lieutenant Card, he gasped. Priority message from SOCOM headquarters. There's been an incident in the South China Sea. Extraction team compromised. Assets in immediate danger. He held out a sealed folder with the highest security classification markings. They're requesting you specifically, ma'am. Operational deployment, effective immediately. The room fell absolutely silent as everyone processed the implications of this development. Congressional testimony or operational deployment, a political battle or a combat mission. The decision would reveal Astrid's true priorities more clearly than any testimony ever could. Ever faced with impossible choices while others watched and judged your decisions? Share your thoughts below on maintaining focus when competing priorities demand your attention. Astrid regarded the sealed folder with the same composed focus she had maintained throughout the program. Every eye in the room watched for her reaction, each person present understanding that this moment represented a fundamental choice between political obligation and operational duty. Without hesitation, she accepted the folder from the communications officer. Please inform Admiral Haraway that I'll be in the secure briefing room immediately, she stated calmly, then turned to Dr. Rao. Ma'am, it appears we have a scheduling conflict. Naval Special Warfare Command will need to provide an alternative representative for the committee hearing. Dr. Rao's expression shifted from surprise to understanding. The operational deployment takes precedence over congressional testimony? Always, ma'am, that's the job. The significance of her choice resonated throughout the room. Despite the political storm surrounding her, despite the opportunity to defend herself and the program through official testimony, Astrid had chosen the mission without hesitation. It was the clearest demonstration of her priorities she could have provided. Lieutenant Vega stepped forward. I'll coordinate with the command center to prepare for your deployment briefing. Thank you, Lieutenant. Please also ensure the training schedule continues without interruption. The qualification process remains the priority for everyone not directly involved in this operation. As Astrid departed with the communications officer, the room erupted into hushed conversations. The trainees exchanged significant glances, recognizing that they had witnessed something important about the reality of special warfare service beyond the training scenarios they had been practicing. In the secure briefing room, Admiral Haraway waited with two officers bearing Special Operations Command insignia. The atmosphere was tense, focused entirely on operational requirements rather than the media controversy still unfolding outside. Lieutenant, the Admiral acknowledged as she entered. I assume you've been notified of the situation. Preliminary notification only, sir, Astrid replied, presenting the sealed folder she had not yet opened. Open it, Haraway instructed. You'll need the full briefing before making your decision. Astrid broke the security seal and reviewed the contents quickly, her expression unchanging despite the gravity of the information. The folder contained intelligence regarding a covert intelligence gathering team operating in disputed waters of the South China Sea. Their mission had been compromised, their extraction route blocked by unexpected naval patrols, and their situation was deteriorating rapidly. The team lead is Lieutenant Commander Ellis, one of the SOCOM officers explained. He specifically requested you for the extraction based on your previous operation in the region. The Malaysian extraction, Astrid noted, connecting the pieces. Similar parameters but significantly higher political sensitivity given current tensions. Correct. 3 Chinese destroyer groups have moved into the area, ostensibly for exercises but effectively creating a blockade around our team's position. Conventional extraction would likely trigger an international incident. Admiral Haraway studied her carefully. To be absolutely clear, Lieutenant, this is a request, not an order. You have the right to decline given your current assignment and the political situation. With respect, sir, there is no decision to make. If the team needs extraction and I'm the requested operator, I'll deploy immediately. The Admiral nodded, having clearly expected this response. The congressional situation will resolve itself regardless of my presence, sir. The operational requirement takes priority. Dr. Rao will report this decision to the committee, Haraway noted. It may complicate matters politically. Politics isn't my concern, sir. Mission success is. The briefing proceeded with clinical efficiency, covering insertion methods, extraction routes, and contingency plans. The operation would require Astrid to deploy with a minimal team, just 2 additional operators with specialized maritime skills, and utilize unconventional approaches to avoid detection by the Chinese naval forces currently saturating the region. Insertion via halo drop from a commercial airliner crossing the region, she noted, reviewing the plan. Innovative approach, weather conditions? Tropical storm system moving through the area, the intelligence officer replied. Provides cover for the drop, but complicates the maritime extraction phase. Timeline? The team's current position will be compromised within 72 hours based on search patterns. Extraction window opens in 36 hours when the storm front provides maximum concealment. Astrid absorbed the operational details with focused intensity, already mentally preparing for deployment. Equipment preparation? Being assembled now. You'll have 90 minutes for final review and personal preparation. As the briefing concluded, Admiral Haraway requested a private word with Astrid. When the others had departed, he spoke with unusual directness. You understand what you're walking away from here, Lieutenant. The congressional hearing represented an opportunity to address the accusations against you personally and defend the integration program on the record. With respect, sir, my testimony would have become a distraction from the program itself. My absence allows the focus to remain on the standards and the qualified candidates where it belongs. Haraway's weathered face showed a hint of approval. Lieutenant Vega will oversee the remaining qualification phases. I've authorized her temporary field promotion to support this role. She's more than capable, sir. The Admiral hesitated, then added, The extraction team you're joining includes Petty Officer Malik from your previous South China Sea operation. He specifically volunteered when your name was mentioned. This information finally produced a visible reaction from Astrid, a slight but genuine smile. That's good to know, sir. Malik is exceptional in maritime operations. I thought you'd appreciate the continuity. Haraway extended his hand, a gesture of respect between professionals. Good hunting, Lieutenant. Bring our people home. 90 minutes later, Astrid had completed her preparation and stood on the tarmac beside the aircraft that would transport her team to the insertion point. The storm clouds gathering on the horizon mirrored the political tempest she was leaving behind, but her focus had already shifted entirely to operational parameters. Lieutenant Vega approached as final equipment checks were being completed. The Washington Post has published a follow-up article, she reported. They're framing your absence from the congressional hearing as evasion of oversight and suggesting the deployment is a manufactured excuse. Irrelevant to mission requirements, Astrid replied without concern. Focus on the qualification program, Lieutenant. That's where the real battle will be won. The trainees are already responding positively. Your choice to deploy rather than testify has made an impression, especially on those who were skeptical of your leadership. Actions over words, Astrid noted simply. The fundamental principle of special operations. As they completed their conversation, Petty Officer Riker appeared, approaching with formal military bearing despite the unusual circumstances. He saluted crisply. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Granted, Petty Officer. The company requested I convey a message before your departure. He extended a small object, a handcrafted trident insignia fashioned from materials available on the base. Every trainee contributed to this, regardless of their previous positions on the integration program. We wanted you to carry it on this mission. Astrid accepted the token with appropriate gravity, recognizing it as the significant gesture it represented. Thank you, Petty Officer. Please inform the company that I'll return it upon successful completion of this operation. As she boarded the aircraft, Astrid secured the makeshift trident in her gear, its presence a tangible reminder of what awaited her return. A training program transformed from a political battleground into a genuine evaluation of capability, regardless of preconceptions. The insertion proceeded according to plan, with Astrid and her two-man team executing a high-altitude jump from the commercial airliner as it passed through the designated drop zone. The gathering storm provided ideal concealment as they deployed their specialized maritime parachutes, designed for minimal radar signature and optimal control in turbulent conditions. They landed precisely at the designated coordinates, 15 kilometers from the compromised intelligence team's position. Using underwater propulsion devices, they navigated through increasingly rough seas, the approaching storm both concealing their movement and complicating their approach. Upon reaching the rendezvous point, a seemingly abandoned fishing vessel anchored in disputed waters, they were met by Lieutenant Commander Ellis, whose relief at their arrival was visible despite his professional composure. "Lieutenant Card," he acknowledged as they boarded, prompt as always. "Situation update?" she inquired, immediately focused on operational requirements. "Deteriorating. Chinese patrol vessels have increased frequency in this sector. We've maintained our cover story as mechanical failure, but they're getting suspicious. 2 intelligence officers and 1 local asset to extract, plus myself. Injuries? Negative, but our local asset is untrained for maritime extraction under these conditions." Astrid nodded, already assessing the revised parameters. "The storm front provides our primary extraction window. We'll move at 0200 hours when it reaches maximum intensity." As they finalized extraction preparations, Ellis mentioned the political situation they had left behind. "News has reached even out here. Quite a controversy you've generated, Lieutenant." "The controversy is irrelevant," Astrid replied, checking equipment with methodical precision. "The mission is what matters." Ellis studied her with newfound appreciation. "That's why they requested you specifically. When everything else becomes noise, you remain focused on the objective." The extraction began precisely at 0200 hours as planned. Under cover of the now raging storm, they transferred the intelligence team to their specialized maritime craft, designed for minimal detection and maximum stability in adverse conditions. Petty Officer Malik, reunited with Astrid for the first time since the Malaysian operation, handled the controls with exceptional skill, navigating through wave heights that would have overwhelmed standard vessels. Their escape route threaded between Chinese patrol zones, utilizing the storm's interference with radar and sonar detection to maintain concealment. For 18 tense hours, they pushed through conditions that teetered on the edge of survivability, the specialized craft barely maintaining integrity against the combined forces of the storm and the South China Sea. Throughout the extraction, Astrid maintained operational command with the same composed focus she had demonstrated during the training program. When a mechanical issue threatened their progress, she personally executed repairs while partially submerged in the churning waters, her movements precise despite the physical challenges. At the extraction's most critical juncture, they encountered an unexpected Chinese patrol vessel that had been driven off course by the storm. Discovery seemed inevitable until Astrid implemented a daring tactical adjustment, using the storm's own patterns to conceal their presence while the patrol passed within 500 meters of their position. "That's why they send you for the impossible ones," Malik commented quietly after the danger had passed. "You see possibilities where others see only obstacles." The extraction concluded successfully when they reached the submarine, deployed to retrieve them. Surfaced briefly in international waters under cover of the still raging storm. As they transferred personnel and equipment to the submarine, Lieutenant Commander Ellis addressed Astrid directly. "The intelligence we gathered will prevent a significant escalation in regional tensions," he informed her. "Your extraction team saved more than just our lives today." Astrid acknowledged this with professional focus rather than personal pride. "That's the job, Commander. No more, no less." The submarine returned to base after 3 days of underwater transit, surfacing in friendly waters where no media presence could observe their arrival. Admiral Haraway waited on the secure dock, his presence indicating the significance attached to this operation, despite its classified nature. "Mission complete, sir," Astrid reported formally as she disembarked. "All personnel extracted successfully with no casualties and no detection by hostile forces." "Well done, Lieutenant," the Admiral replied with genuine approval. "The intelligence is already being processed at the highest levels." As the extracted team was escorted to debriefing facilities, Haraway drew Astrid aside for a private conversation. "While you were deployed, the situation here developed significantly. I think you'll find things have changed. The congressional hearing, sir, proceeded without you, but with unexpected developments. Lieutenant Vega presented documentation regarding the systematic sabotage of the training program, including communications that implicated several senior officers beyond Lieutenant Commander Westbrook. This information registered with Astrid, but her primary concern remained elsewhere. And the qualification program? Continuing under Lieutenant Vega's supervision, with notable success. Final evaluations begin tomorrow. Request permission to resume my duties as lead instructor immediately, sir." Haraway smiled slightly. "Granted, though you might want to review recent media coverage before reappearing on the training field. Your absence created quite a narrative vacuum that others have filled in unexpected ways." Upon returning to her quarters for brief personal maintenance before resuming duties, Astrid found a tablet with news, coverage queued for her review. The Washington Post's follow-up stories had taken an unexpected turn after her departure. The Malaysian ambassador had broken his silence regarding the extraction operation from 2 years prior, publicly acknowledging Astrid's role in rescuing his daughter from terrorist captivity. "Lieutenant Carty's actions saved my daughter when conventional methods had failed," his statement read. "Her courage and expertise represent the highest standards of the United States military, regardless of gender." This intervention had shifted the narrative dramatically, particularly when followed by statements from several prominent retired SEAL commanders who confirmed that specialized operators occasionally conducted missions outside standard attribution channels. While not confirming Astrid's specific status, they established the precedent that made her background plausible rather than exceptional. Most significantly, 27 current and former special operators had signed an open letter supporting the integration program and the application of identical standards regardless of gender. "The only measure that matters in special operations is capability," they wrote. "Those who meet the standard deserve to serve, without qualification or asterisk." The congressional hearing had transformed from an interrogation into a substantive review of special warfare selection processes, with Lieutenant Vega's evidence forcing accountability for those who had attempted to sabotage legitimate evaluation. Lieutenant Commander Westbrook now faced potential disciplinary action for abuse of authority and falsification of training records. As Astrid processed this information, a knock at her door revealed Lieutenant Vega, who had clearly been waiting for her return. "Welcome back, ma'am," she greeted with evident relief. "Successful mission?" "Mission complete," Astrid confirmed simply. "I understand you've been quite busy here as well." "Someone needed to ensure the facts reached the appropriate audiences," Vega replied with a hint of satisfaction. The trainees helped considerably. Once they understood what had happened with the program sabotage, they provided detailed statements about their experiences. "The qualification evaluations begin tomorrow?" "Yes, ma'am. Admiral Haraway has authorized a return to standard special warfare protocols, with evaluation teams from outside this command to ensure objectivity." Astrid nodded approval. "As it should be. Standards applied equally, assessed objectively." "There's one more thing you should know," Vega added. "During your absence, 4 female candidates from other military branches have requested transfer to the next qualification cycle. Your situation has created significant interest in special warfare pathways previously considered closed." This information finally produced a visible reaction from Astrid. Not pride, but a quiet satisfaction that suggested a deeper purpose behind her. Acceptance of this assignment. Good. The standard works when it's allowed to function as designed. The following morning, Astrid returned to the training field as though she had never left, resuming her duties without ceremony or explanation for her absence. The trainees, however, had clearly been following developments. Their response to her reappearance was a new level of focused professionalism that acknowledged what they now understood about her role and experience. As qualification evaluations began, external assessment teams observed with clinical objectivity, applying standard protocols without the bias that had characterized previous phases. Astrid supervised without interference, allowing the process to unfold according to established special warfare doctrine. Admiral Haraway joined the observation team midway through the first day, positioning himself beside Astrid as they watched trainees navigate a particularly demanding maritime extraction scenario. Your operational absence created an interesting opportunity, he commented quietly. Without you present to focus their attacks, Westbrook's allies were forced to address the program itself, rather than your personal situation. Sometimes removing the personality from the equation clarifies the actual principles at stake, Astrid replied, watching as Team 2 executed a textbook extraction under simulated hostile conditions. The principles were never really in question, Haraway noted. Capability is capability, regardless of packaging, but some lessons require demonstration rather than explanation. The qualification evaluations continued for 3 intensive days, testing every aspect of special warfare competency under conditions that allowed no favoritism or bias. When the final evolution concluded, 8 trainees had successfully met all requirements, including 2 who had previously been assessed as borderline under Westbrook's manipulated evaluation system. The qualification ceremony was scheduled for 800 the following morning, traditionally a formal occasion where newly qualified operators received their Trident insignias. As preparations were completed, Admiral Haraway made an unexpected announcement. The ceremony would be attended by the Chief of Naval Operations himself, the Navy's highest-ranking officer. This unprecedented attention reflected the significance now attached to the program following the public controversy and congressional scrutiny. What had begun as a quiet evaluation initiative had transformed into a watershed moment for special warfare integration, with implications extending far beyond this single qualification class. The morning of the ceremony brought clear skies and calm seas, a stark contrast to the stormy conditions that had surrounded Astrid's extraction mission. The training field had been prepared with military precision, with the 8 qualifying trainees positioned in formation before a reviewing stand occupied by senior navals. Leadership. Admiral Haraway opened the proceedings with formal remarks regarding the program's objectives and standards, carefully avoiding any mention of the controversy that had nearly derailed it. Today we recognize individuals who have met the uncompromising requirements of naval special warfare qualification. Nothing more, nothing less. The Chief of Naval Operations then stepped forward to address the gathering. His presence elevated the ceremony from a routine qualification event to a statement of institutional priorities, his words carrying policy implications that would resonate throughout the military establishment. "The standard is the standard," he began, echoing the principle Astrid had maintained throughout the program. "In naval special warfare, we measure capability, not characteristics. Those who meet our requirements have earned their place, without qualification or asterisk." He then introduced an unexpected element to the ceremony. "Before presenting qualification insignia to these candidates, I want to recognize the leadership that made this program successful despite extraordinary challenges." At his gesture, Astrid was called forward from her position with the instructional staff. She approached with military precision, her bearing flawless despite the unexpected spotlight. "Lieutenant Astrid Card," the CNO announced formally, "your exceptional service in establishing and maintaining uncompromising standards during this integration initiative deserves special recognition. Moreover, your operational excellence during multiple classified deployments has exemplified the capabilities we seek to develop through this program." From a ceremonial case, he removed a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. "For professional achievement in the superior performance of your duties, this commendation acknowledges service that represents the core values of the United States Navy." As he presented the medal, he added quietly, "The Malaysian ambassador sends his personal regards, Lieutenant." Astrid accepted the commendation with appropriate military protocol, betraying no emotion despite the public acknowledgement of service that had previously remained classified. Her focus remained on the trainees standing at attention, awaiting the insignia that represented their successful qualification. Following the presentation, she was invited to participate in the qualification ceremony itself, an honor typically reserved for senior command leadership. As each trainee stepped forward to receive their Trident insignia, Astrid stood alongside the Chief of Naval Operations, physically embodying the integration she had helped establish. When Petty Officer Riker, who had emerged as the top performer in the final evaluations, received his insignia, he presented Astrid with the handcrafted trident she had carried on her extraction mission. "Returned as promised, ma'am," he stated formally. "Mission complete." The ceremony concluded with, Traditional naval precision, but its implications extended far beyond the training field. Media representatives, kept at a respectful distance but permitted to observe, captured images that would appear in national publications the following day, visually documenting a transformation in special warfare that many had considered impossible just months earlier. As the formal proceedings ended and the gathering began to disperse, Lieutenant Commander Ellis approached Astrid with Petty Officer Malik at his side. Both wore civilian attire that indicated they had come directly from debriefing following their extraction. "Quite a different setting from where we last parted, Lieutenant," Ellis observed with professional appreciation. "Different operational parameters," Astrid replied simply. "Same standards." "The intelligence we gathered has been processed at the highest levels," Ellis informed her. "Potential confrontation in the region has been averted based on our findings." "That's good to hear, sir." Malik, less formal than his commanding officer, added, "Word spreading about the South China Sea extraction. Not officially, of course, but operators talk. What you pulled off in those storm conditions is becoming something of a legend in certain circles." "Legends are counterproductive," Astrid responded, echoing her previous statement to Lieutenant Vega. "The operation succeeded because of thorough preparation and appropriate personnel selection, not exceptional circumstances." "Some might say the same about this qualification program," Ellis noted, gesturing toward the departing trainees with their newly presented insignia. "Appropriate standards applied without bias produce predictable results." As they continued their conversation, Admiral Haraway approached with the Chief of Naval Operations. "Lieutenant Card," the Admiral began, "the CNO has a matter to discuss regarding your next assignment." The chief studied Astrid with experienced eyes that had evaluated countless officers throughout his distinguished career. "Your current assignment concludes with this qualification cycle, Lieutenant. I understand you're due to return to operational status." "Yes, sir," Astrid confirmed. "I'm available for immediate deployment as required." "That remains an option," the CNO acknowledged. "However, Naval Special Warfare Command has proposed an alternative assignment. They've requested you to develop a comprehensive integration framework based on your experience with this program, potentially serving as program director for future qualification cycles. This proposal represented a significant career decision, continuing as an operational SEAL or transitioning to a role that would shape institutional policy and future integration efforts. The choice would define not just Astrid's professional path, but potentially the nature of special warfare evolution for years to come. "The operational needs should take priority, sir," she responded after brief consideration. "But if Command believes my experience would better serve the Navy in program development, I'm prepared to accept that assignment." The CNO nodded, having expected this answer from his briefings about her character and priorities. "Consider both options carefully, Lieutenant. This isn't a decision to make without reflection. I'll expect your response within the week." After the senior officers departed, Astrid found herself momentarily alone on the training field where the program had begun nearly 18 weeks earlier. The morning sun illuminated the obstacle course where trainees had first demonstrated their physical capabilities, the tactical simulation buildings where operational skills had been evaluated, and the briefing center where the confrontation with Westbrook had triggered the program's transformation. Lieutenant Vega joined her, following her gaze across the training facility. "Quite a journey from where we started," she observed. "Hard to believe it's the same program." "It isn't," Astrid replied. "It's the program it was always meant to be once the interference was removed." "Will you accept the program director position?" Astrid considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. The next integration class deserves the same opportunity these candidates received. Evaluation based on capability, not characteristics. If my presence helps ensure that standard, then yes. Vega smiled slightly. "I thought you might say that. The standard matters more than the preferences." "Always has," Astrid agreed. "That's what Westbrook and his allies never understood. The standard isn't arbitrary. It exists because operational requirements demand it. When applied correctly, it selects the right personnel regardless of preconceptions." As they walked back toward the command center, they passed the qualification class dispersing to their quarters, their new insignia visible on their uniforms. One of the newly qualified operators, a trainee who had struggled under Westbrook's biased evaluation system but thrived after the program restructuring, saluted as they passed. "Thank you, ma'am," he said simply, for maintaining the standard when it would have been easier to lower it. Astrid returned his salute with appropriate formality. "You earned your place, petty officer. No more, no less." 6 months later, as the second integration qualification cycle neared completion, Astrid stood on the same training field, watching a new class of candidates navigate the final evaluation scenarios. The program had evolved based on lessons from the first cycle, with refined protocols and objective assessment criteria that eliminated the potential for bias or manipulation. Admiral Haraway, visiting to observe the final evaluations, joined her as the candidates completed the maritime extraction scenario that had proven particularly challenging for previous classes. "Impressive performance," he noted, as Team 3 executed a textbook, extraction under simulated hostile conditions. Statistically identical results to standard SEAL qualification cycles, despite the integrated candidate pool. "The standard works when it's applied correctly, sir," Astrid replied. "That was never really in question. For some of us," Haraway acknowledged, "others needed demonstration rather than explanation." As they continued their observation, Astrid noticed a familiar figure among the visiting staff, Dr. Rao from the Congressional Research Service, who had returned to evaluate the program's progress following the political controversy of the previous cycle. "Your program has become something of a model for other special operations communities," Dr. Rao commented as she joined them. "The methodology you've developed is being studied by Army Special Forces and Air Force Combat Control, among others." "The methodology isn't complex," Astrid pointed out. "Standard requirements applied without bias or preconception, with evaluation based on demonstrated capability rather than assumed limitations." "Simple in theory," Dr. Rao agreed. "Remarkably challenging in execution, as the previous cycle demonstrated." As the final evolution concluded, Astrid gathered the qualification candidates for debriefing. Unlike the previous cycle, where tension and political undercurrents had dominated every interaction, this group displayed the focused professionalism that characterized successful special warfare operators, regardless of background or characteristics. "Final evaluations will be completed by 0800 tomorrow," she informed them. "Those who meet qualification standards will be notified immediately. Those who do not will receive detailed assessment and remediation recommendations for potential requalification." One candidate raised his hand. "Ma'am, there's been discussion about your operational deployment during the previous cycle. Is that standard for program directors, or was it an exceptional circumstance?" The question referenced the South China Sea extraction that had occurred during the political controversy, an operation now known within special warfare circles, despite its classified nature. "Operational requirements always take priority," Astrid replied simply. "That's true for every qualified operator, regardless of additional duties or assignments." As the candidates dispersed, Lieutenant Vega, now permanently assigned to the integration program as intelligence coordinator, approached with updated evaluation metrics. "Preliminary results indicate 14 candidates meeting qualification standards," she reported, statistically consistent with traditional SEAL qualification rates. "As expected," Astrid noted, reviewing the data. "Capability distributes independently of demographic characteristics when selection criteria focus on operational requirements." Admiral Haraway, overhearing this exchange, commented, "That conclusion seems obvious in retrospect, yet required extraordinary effort to demonstrate in practice." "Most worthwhile standards do, sir," Astrid replied. Later that evening, as qualification results were finalized for announcement the following day, Astrid received an unexpected visitor. Lieutenant Commander Westbrook, no longer in uniform, but dressed in civilian attire that indicated his separation from active service, requested a brief meeting through official channels. Against the advice of several staff members, Astrid agreed to the meeting, receiving him in the same briefing room where their confrontation had occurred months earlier. The contrast between then and now was striking. Westbrook's formerly commanding presence diminished by civilian clothing and the visible weight of professional consequences, while Astrid's quiet authority had been enhanced by institutional validation and operational success. "Thank you for seeing me, Lieutenant," he began with unexpected humility. "I wanted to speak with you before the qualification announcements tomorrow." "Of course, Mr. Westbrook," she replied with professional courtesy, using his civilian address to acknowledge his changed status without emphasizing it. He struggled visibly with whatever he had come to say, pride warring with some other emotion that seemed unfamiliar to his features. "I've had considerable time to reflect on my actions during the previous qualifications cycle," he finally stated. "My opposition to the integration program was never about standards, as I claimed. It was about protecting a system that had defined my identity and career." Astrid listened without interruption, her expression neutral but attentive. "The evidence Lieutenant Vega presented was accurate," Westbrook continued. "I deliberately manipulated evaluation criteria and created artificial obstacles targeted specifically at integrated candidates. That was not just unprofessional, but fundamentally contrary to the principles of naval special warfare." He paused, seeming to gather resolve for his next statement. "I owe you an apology, Lieutenant. Not just for the physical confrontation, which was inexcusable, but for failing to uphold the standards I claimed to defend." Astrid considered her response carefully, aware that this moment represented more than a personal interaction. "Apology accepted, Mr. Westbrook. The standards remain, regardless of our individual relationship to them. They're what matter, not our interpretations or preferences." "That's what I finally understood, watching this cycle's results from a distance," he acknowledged. "The standard works when it's applied as designed. The candidates who've qualified under your program are performing at or above the levels of traditionally selected operators. The data is irrefutable." As their conversation concluded, Westbrook made a final observation. "You could have ended my career immediately after the incident. Instead, you demonstrated the restraint that characterizes true special warfare operators. That lesson wasn't lost on those who witnessed it." The following morning brought the qualification announcements, conducted with the same military precision that had characterized the entire program. 14 candidates received their Trident insignia, having met every requirement without exception or special consideration. Their achievements represented not just personal success, but validation of the integration framework Astrid had developed. As the newly qualified operators dispersed to prepare for their first operational assignments, Admiral Haraway presented Astrid with official orders confirming her position as permanent director of the Special Warfare Integration Program. "The Chief of Naval Operations personally authorized this assignment," he informed her. "Your operational status remains active, with deployment availability as mission requirements dictate." This unique arrangement acknowledged both her exceptional value to the integration program and her continued importance as an operational asset, a balance that reflected the dual nature of her contribution to naval special warfare. As they discussed the upcoming training cycle and potential program refinements, a communication officer approached with an urgent message. "Priority transmission from SOCOM headquarters, ma'am," he reported, presenting a sealed folder similar to the one that had preceded her South China Sea deployment. Astrid accepted the folder with the same composed focus that had characterized her approach throughout the program's evolution. Whatever operational requirement awaited within those pages would receive the same professional attention she had applied to the integration challenge. Standards maintained, mission accomplished, without qualification or asterisk. Admiral Haraway watched her review the contents, recognizing the shift in her focus from program administration to operational planning. "Another extraction requirement?" he inquired. "Yes, sir," she confirmed. "Northern Arabian Sea region. Time-sensitive intelligence asset requiring specialized extraction protocols. Will you accept the assignment?" Astrid looked up from the operational details, her decision already made with the clarity that had defined her approach to every challenge. "The mission requires appropriate personnel, sir. If I'm deemed the appropriate operator, then yes." As she prepared for potential deployment, gathering the specialized equipment her mission would require, Astrid passed the qualification field, where the next integration class would soon begin their journey. The obstacle course where Westbrook had once attempted to demonstrate female inadequacy now represented the first step toward proven capability for candidates judged solely on their performance rather than their characteristics. Lieutenant Vega, who would oversee the program during any operational absence, joined her for final briefing on transitional requirements. "The system works now," she observed. "Each qualification cycle strengthens the framework and validates the methodology. Because it's based on actual standards rather than artificial barriers," Astrid replied. The requirement was never to prove anyone could meet the standard, only to ensure everyone had the opportunity to try. As she completed her preparations, securing specialized equipment for the pending extraction mission, Astrid received one final visitor. Petty Officer Riker, now deployed with an operational SEAL team, had returned briefly to observe the qualification ceremony. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" he requested with the formal military courtesy that had characterized their professional relationship. "Granted, Petty Officer. I wanted you to know that our team recently completed a joint operation with several graduates from your first integration cycle," he reported. "Their performance was exceptional under extreme conditions. No distinctions, no accommodations, just operators executing the mission." "As it should be," Astrid noted with quiet satisfaction. "That's what you demonstrated from the beginning," Riker continued. "When Westbrook slapped you in that briefing room, you could have responded with anger or indignation. Instead, you demonstrated perfect control and professional correction. That wasn't just about defending yourself. It was showing what the standard actually looks like when properly applied." Astrid considered this perspective thoughtfully. "Standards exist for a reason, Petty Officer. They define what's required, not who's permitted to achieve it. That distinction makes all the difference." As she departed for her operational briefing, the qualification field behind her stood ready for the next cycle of candidates who would be judged solely on their demonstrated capability rather than any preconception or bias. The program she had helped establish had transformed from controversial experiment to institutional framework, ensuring that the standard, the real standard, would remain the only measure that mattered. Have you ever witnessed someone quietly excel while others underestimated them? Share your story about someone who let their actions speak louder than words and change perceptions through performance rather than protest.